For joining us here today as we talk about the Hurricane Helene Agricultural and Timber Relief Fund. My name is Samantha Jean. I'm the Director of Communications here for the Department of Agriculture, and I really appreciate everyone taking time out of their evening to come join us, learn more about this program, and get your questions answered. I do have a little bit of housekeeping. I just want to make sure everyone knows that this webinar is being recorded, and that is so that we can give it to people who didn't have the time to make it this evening and they can rewatch it. So if you have a concern about that, you can leave at this time, but I just want to make sure everyone is aware of that. The chat is open. So if you have something to say during our presentation, that is open, but I encourage you to wait until the end because we will do a question and answer session near the end, and you can get all of that answered then. So we're going to go ahead and kick off, and I'm going to introduce our Commissioner of Agriculture, Andy Holt.
Thank you very much, Samantha, and thanks to everybody who's joining us this evening, and we appreciate the opportunity to be here with you and roll out a little bit more detail relative to this new opportunity for those of you who are impacted by Hurricane Helene. Do want to just recognize that yesterday we had the opportunity to go in and speak with Governor Lee, meet with him actually in his office. Governor Lee appoints me to this role as Commissioner of Agriculture, for those who may not know, and we had the opportunity to go in and hear directly from Governor Lee about his thoughts on this program, and that's if anybody saw any of the information that came yesterday, he gave his own thoughts about the situation, and certainly recognized the impact, the really catastrophic impact that this event has had on these 8 counties in Northeast Tennessee. And so, the recognition of the widespread damage is something that, I think everybody is clearly in receipt of that. Many of us have actually been on site and seen that damage in person. I've been there a couple of times, and there's still zones, many of you all know, and many of y'all may still live in those areas that almost appear to still be apocalyptic to some degree. I can only imagine what it was like the day of the damage. But certainly recognize that there's been significant loss in that area, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's perennial vegetation, whether it was market losses due specifically to losses that occurred that day, and other hardships that were created. And then not only the impact to the agricultural and timber infrastructure, but also just the damage to the land. That's probably been the part that has been so clear and easy to recognize for even a non-agricultural, non-timber expert, is to look at the change in the landscape that occurred as a result of that flooding. What we want to do is today is give more details again relative to this relief fund and the details associated with it, and just recognize that there's going to be an emphasis moving into the future. We're trying to help mitigate to the degree that we can with the funding that we have available, the impacts that were brought upon that area September of 2024. We do want to again recognize the fact that this funding was brought to us by USDA through a block grant mechanism that was made available to not only Tennessee, but other states that were impacted by Hurricane Helene. And we are certainly going to do our very best to stretch these dollars and mitigate as much damage as we possibly can. So the purpose of our webinar this evening is just to provide a really clear overview of the program. That's going to include eligibility, the covered losses that we're anticipating, and then also the application process. There's going to be a 90-day period, and a lot of details are going to be discussed this evening. And at any point, we've gone over this information time and time with one another, but we certainly want to go over it with you. And if you have any questions, that's why we're here, is to make ourselves available, not only now, but on an ongoing basis into the future. As you have questions, we want to make this as easy of a process as we possibly can. But certainly are inclined to hear your thoughts and opinions. So do want to transition over to our relief grant team. So we've got several folks that are helping us in the management of this process, and some of y'all are going to be first name basis with some of these folks into the future. But want to introduce Rachel Hauber, and then Edwards, Mike Meeks, Andy Hart, Sydney Lewis. They're going to give a little bit of information about themselves. I hope that throughout this process, they are able to assist you. Certainly, the impression that we've received from dealing with these folks, we appreciate their efforts. We think that you will as well. So at this time, I want to turn it over to Rachel. Just tell everyone again, we appreciate them joining us this evening.
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner Holt. Good evening, everyone. I'm Rachel Halber, project manager on this project here. Very excited to be with you all tonight. Before we dive into the overview, I just wanted to share our contact information. This will be at the end of the presentation as well. But there's the direct link to the webpage as well as our email, and we do all have access to the email inbox. So feel free to email us at ag.recovery@tn.gov. And we also have 2 phone lines. So we have a toll-free number listed on your screen and then a regular 615 number. So again, we will be here from 8 a.m. to 5:30 Eastern Time, 7 to 4:30 Central Time. If you all have questions, feel free to call or email, and we will return your message if we're not here right away to answer. So please feel free to utilize those different methods of reaching out to us. All right. So before we dig into kind of the meat of the presentation, just wanted to start off with a very high-level overview. I'll go over the timeline, eligibility, and loss categories, and then turn it over to others on the team to review your required documentation, walk through the application process, provide some additional resources, and then, as Samantha said, we'll close out with a Q&A session. So as Commissioner said, after Hurricane Helene caused major wind and flood damage in East Tennessee in September of 2024, the Tennessee Department of Agriculture with USDA funding created the Hurricane Helene Agricultural and Timber Relief Fund to help affected farmers and forest landowners recover. This program is designed to help offset a portion of eligible verified agricultural and timber damages in 8 eligible counties to restore productivity and stability to land and businesses. Note that this program is designed to support recovery and not expansion of farms or forest lands. So as you can see from this timeline, we've been actively working in cooperation with USDA over the past several months, almost a year, to execute an agreement first and then to finalize our work plan. As Commissioner said, we're excited that we were finally able to launch the application as of 1 p.m. Eastern Time yesterday. And the application will remain open until 5 p.m. on Tuesday, July 21st. So you all have plenty of time to submit your application. And again, we'll be here to help you along the way. Although we will be reviewing applications as they come in, we won't notify applicants of their award until the application period ends. All payments will then be sent at the same time, about 8 to 10 weeks after the application period closes, which, as you can see on the timeline here, is approximately September 29th. All right, so who can apply? This grant is open to farm or forest landowners, including individuals, families, and agribusinesses. Producers with documented crop or timber losses caused by Hurricane Helene, or producers who lease land for agricultural or forestry production who can also document eligible losses are able to apply as well. Operations must be located in at least one of the 8 Helene declared disaster counties, which are Carter, Cocke, Greene, Hamblin, Hawkins, Johnson, Unicoi, and Washington. We'll be looking at losses in 4 main areas: infrastructure, future economic, market, and timber. And each of these categories focus on types of damage that haven't been covered already by other funding sources. This slide here provides an overview of what specific losses fall under each category. So starting with infrastructure, eligible losses can include above ground irrigation, on-farm roads, bridges, and culverts, high tunnels or hoop houses, silos or steel grain silos, poles or general purpose barns, fruit or vegetable packing houses or cold storage buildings, and tobacco curing barns. Future economic losses include perennial crops that were destroyed by the storm, may take many years to regrow and produce income again. Market losses are demonstrated by showing that you had mature crops that were spoiled or had to be discarded before they could be sold, canceled sales contracts with area markets because they lost power and couldn't get the fruits and vegetables to market before they would be spoiled. Those would count. And then finally, timber losses, which include a minimum of 10 contiguous acres that can show moderate or severe level of timber damage. Timber losses will also be required to submit a forest management plan for a minimum of a 10-year plan cycle. And this information we'll share with you later in the presentation, but the forest management plan template, how to find an accredited forester to help you complete that plan, all of that information is available on our webpage. So on this slide, we're highlighting some examples that may be eligible under this program. So first, infrastructure loss. So think about damage to physical structures that are essential to farm operations. So an equipment barn that collapsed during the storm, or an access bridge to a farm that was washed out. Next, future economic loss. Again, this focuses on perennial crops, so plants that take years to mature before they generate income. Examples include apple orchards, grapevines, or Christmas trees. And then we have market loss. Again, this applies when a producer lost a sales opportunity because the crops were destroyed or lost before they could be sold. And then finally, timber loss. So an example of this loss includes hardwood or softwood trees that were snapped or uprooted across a single tract. So that is pretty much it at a high level in terms of the eligibility categories, some examples of what those losses entail. Now I'm actually going to turn it over to Mike, who will talk about the documentation that will be required when you submit your application. So Mike, I will toss it to you.
Thank you, Rachel. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Meek. I'm one of the grants analysts here that'll be working on this project. And before we actually get into the bulk of the application process, I wanted to speak a little about some of the things you're going to need to upload as documentation for your applications, and it's really to your benefit to get this stuff together beforehand. First, there's some general things, just some applicant information. We do need proof of ownership or legal responsibility. This would be for owners a deed or a title to the land. For those who are leasing their land, we need a copy of the rental agreement as it stood in when the hurricane hit. Some tax documentation. You will be asked to submit an IRS W-9. This helps in our payment process at the end of the application. And if you're applying or having someone else apply for you, like you're applying on behalf of a business or something like that, some documents such as power of attorney or articles of incorporation that will show us that it is a legitimate thing and not somebody trying to just piggyback off of a tragedy here. We're also going to ask for some farm or forest land information. First and foremost, the farm or forest land location. This is not necessarily the mailing address where a farmer or timber owner lives, because we realize that the actual land affected could be separate from the mailing address. So we're going to need the address of the property, the farm or forest latitude and longitude, are the tax parcel ID. We do have links inside the application that will direct you to a place where you can look these things up. You do not have to know these things off the top of your head. If you have an FSA number, we're going to ask for that as well. And we're going to ask for some documentation that shows land use classification. This could be like a tax abatement document, some agricultural production or records documentations, GIS maps, possibly. Next slide, Rachel. As far as the different types of loss, we are going to ask for different types of documentation on that. For infrastructure loss, we're going to ask for proof of damage, 3 to 5 photos per structure, preferably in a horizontal layout, and preferably time-stamped if we can get them. So we can show maybe something before and after, some explanatory letters from the extension office, maybe. Estimate of repairs are always nice. If you've already done repairs, some of the documentation from the receipts and such. If you've claimed insurance, we're going to ask you for the proof of insurance claim or funds. And this is to kind of make sure nobody is double dipping here. We're going to ask for insurance claim or invoices or receipts. Future economic loss, as Rachel alluded to, refers to like perennial crops. These would be your more orchard crops, some of your berries, Christmas trees and such. We're going to ask for yield receipts from the previous year's crop to show that you were indeed growing those things. Some photos, again, preferably timestamp. The land parcel information, again, that actually would carry through as well. So you don't have to do it twice, but if you haven't got supporting information, you could upload it here. And maybe some university research regarding the productive life cycle of fruit trees or bush plants. So it's just something to show how it is. I will note that we do have a thing inside the application that will help you to calculate that. There's some table stuff in there. And again, if you've claimed any insurance on these items, we're going to ask for the insurance claim or possibly a non-insured disaster assistance payment or NAP. If you've received those from USDA, we'll ask for proof of those as well. Next slide. As far as market loss goes, we're going to ask for documentation or evidence that the harvested crops, they were destroyed or they remained unharvested or just rotted in the in storage. Most importantly, for the market loss, we're going to ask for canceled sales records. If a farmer has a contract set up to sell, and for some reason that market just became unavailable, where there was the destruction of the roads to the market or destruction of the market itself, the physical building, and they had to cancel, we're going to ask for you to provide that. Inventory records are also helpful. And again, that ever-present proof of insurance claims, NAP payments, any kind of invoices or receipts you'll get from that. Timber loss is a little different. In the timber is very different from crops, but for that we're going to ask for proof of 10 contiguous timber acres under the same ownership, at least 3 photos of the damaged timber, an aerial map, which you can usually get online, and a forest management plan for a minimum of a 10-year plan cycle. This is going to have to be authored by an accredited forester, and there is some cost share provided on that. As far as the cost share information in the list of accredited foresters, a list of these things are available on our webpage, and they're at the site listed there. I'll pause for a second if anybody wants to take a look at that or take a picture of that. But there's some really good information on that for people who are claiming timber loss. So I would encourage you, if you're doing so, to get out there and read some of that. It's very, very helpful. And I think that covers most of my topic. I will go ahead and turn it over to Mary then. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening, everyone. I'm Mary Edwards, the project coordinator, auditor, and monitor, and I'll be reviewing our application process through a live demonstration on the Submittable platform. And I'll start with a few highlights about Submittable. Submittable will serve as TDA's Hurricane Helene Agriculture and Timber Relief Funds application system. Application link can be accessed by visiting the Tennessee Department of Agriculture's Hurricane Helene Agriculture and Timber Relief Fund webpage. Applicants will be prompted to create a free Submittable account before beginning the application. Applicants that require translation services to be provided at no cost to applicant should email ag.recovery@tn.gov. Our application process is arranged in 3 steps, beginning with the eligibility form. Those questions verify county, legal owner or lessee, minimum acreage, and so on. If deemed eligible, you'll move on to step 2, completing the applicant information form, which entails a knowledge-based authentication quiz, general loss information, where you enter the total number of request forms you need. You'll need one per farm or forest land. Then, once submitted, you'll be sent an email from Submittable for your request form. Finally, on step 3, applicants will complete one form per specific farm or forest land. And then a confirmation email will be sent after each request form. So that means if you have 2 separate farm or forest land properties, that you'll need to fill out a request form for each one of them, and you'll get a confirmation after you complete each one. Next, I'll move into a live demonstration. I'm going to cut my camera off because I'll need to rearrange my screens. And then I'm going to ask for just a brief moment to do that. Thank you.
Samantha, while we wait for Mary, I believe there was a question that came through the chat asking about the IRS form. And either one would be appropriate. So not sure, I can't see the question, not sure if you want to repeat it and then we can
Yeah,
get that
I can
answer.
repeat
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah. So Benjamin asked if Power of Attorney IRS 2848 or Tennessee Department of Revenue POA was what you were looking for. And so it looks like Michael has replied to it in the chat, and he said that either one of those would be sufficient proof of power of attorney.
Great, thank you. All right, Mary, are you ready?
Yes. Can you all
Right.
see my screen?
We can, thank you.
Okay. All right. Here you can see our Tennessee Department of Agriculture Hurricane Helene Agriculture and Timber Relief Fund application. So I'm pausing for just a second so you can kind of look at the top. And if you'll notice here in this corner, you have a button that says Manage Collaborators. So if there's someone that you need to assist you with, completing the application, you can click here, enter that person's email address, and that could be more than one person. You would just need to separate it by a comma, click invite, and that will send them an email invitation. Here are some tips on how to use Submittable and how to save your draft, which means that you can start the application and then come back to it later. And if you need to collaborate with someone, you can pause and then they can go into the application and pick up where you left off if needed. There's some information here about that. And then a little bit further down, here's some information about our translation and interpretation services, as well as information on how to contact us regarding that. All right, so the first set of information, as we mentioned before, is going to be the applicant information form. And so I'm going to walk through just putting in some information so that you can see how that works. So first I'm going to enter an applicant name. And this is going to be for an individual. And so this is going to be a sole proprietorship. In the event that you have another type of business, you'll select the appropriate one here. Next, you'll move on to applicant's address, which can be different from the location of the loss being claimed in the fund, which means if you receive mail at an address that is different from your farm or forest land, you would enter that here. Now I'm going to enter the applicant's email. This is the email address where all the program correspondence will be sent. So it's very important that you enter the correct email address here where you'd like to receive any communications, because you will receive communications throughout the review process. Here, where it says, is the person completing the application as a representative of the applicant? I'm going to select no here, but in the event that the answer is yes, such as a power of attorney, officer of a trust, you enter that person's name here, or they will. Then they'll put in what type of representation they are. So if they're your power of attorney, they'll put that here, and then they'll submit supporting documentation that lets us know, that actually verifies that they are who they say they are, and authorized to apply on your behalf. You'll also upload a W-9. You want to make sure that W-9 is clear, legible, that your town is not abbreviated, and again, that everything is legible and clear. If you have an Edison ID, you'll want to put that here. We also have a process to assist you with getting registered if you do not. And I do want to mention that the not having an Edison ID will not hold up the process of your application. Here, you want to select the type of tax identification number being submitted. In this case, we're doing a sole proprietorship, so it is likely that we would be using a social security number rather than an EIN. And this is where we enter the knowledge-based authentication quiz that we discussed earlier on in our slide deck. And so that will look like this. So you enter your first name, last name, date of birth, social, email address, so on and so forth. And then select initiate quiz. Of course, I'm not going to enter my personal information in there, but that is what that will look like. You'll move on down, and this is where we get into our general loss information. So it's important here to note that for however many specific farms or forest land, this is where you'll enter that number, because you'll need to fill out an individual form for each one. So here I'm going to say that I have one farm or forest land, and that it has that I've suffered an infrastructure loss and a timber loss. So then we move into applicant attestations. And here you are attesting that the information that you're making, the statements that you're making here on the application are truthful, complete, and correct. I'm not going to read through every single one of them, but I will pause just for a moment if you want to kind of look over them and review them. I'll read the first couple. I have a financial risk in the eligible loss type. I am an eligible producer defined as a person or legal entity that is a citizen of the United States, resident alien for purposes of this part. Resident alien means lawful alien as defined in 7 CFR Part 1400. Partnership consisting solely of citizens or resident aliens of the United States, corporation, limited liability corporation, or other farm organizational structure organized under state law consisting solely of citizens or resident aliens of the United States or Indian tribe or tribal organization, as defined in Section 4B of the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act, 25 USC 5304, with eligible losses as a direct result of Hurricane Helene in an eligible county or counties as required by this program. That is a long way of saying that that you certify that you're an eligible producer, essentially. And so they go on to list out and define more of what that looks like. You'll certify things here. And then by checking this box, you'll certify that the statements above, the statements made and information provided on this application, and any other submitted documents, which would be those documents that Mike reviewed in the previous slides, are truthful, complete, and correct. And I understand that any false statements made as part of this application or any other submitted documents can be the subject of substantial civil and/or criminal liability and sanctions. So you would check there. And if you are the signatory, you'll sign your name there. And if you're the signatory, you'll sign your name here. And then again, you will put your capacity, so power of attorney, officer of the trust, and so on. And then you'll date it. Here you see the button where you can save your draft, and then you can also apply. So I'm going to save this draft. And then I'm going to switch over to a different view so that I can show you what the other forms look like. All right. This is what your request form will look like for your farm or forest land. Once you receive the email for your request form, there we go. Once you receive your request form, you will see this view. And so in this section, you'll complete the following information for an individual farm or forest land. Land use classification can be verified by submitting any of the following documentation dated from 2023 or 2024 before Hurricane Helene. That part is very important when it comes to your documentation. Agriculture or forestry timber property tax abatement documentation, agriculture production records documentation, previously established forest or timber management plan, GIS maps, or other documents. It then notes here that final award amounts may change based on the number of eligible applications and total funding requested, but awards will not exceed 90% of your total eligible losses. So here you enter your farm or forest land name. The notifications here note that if you cannot find your address using the field below, you can still enter your latitude and longitude instead. And the mailing address requires a street number before the street name. So for Sarah Whitmore's farm, we're going to simply name it Sarah Whitmore's Farm. All right, and I'm going to enter the farm forest land latitude. And a longitude. And then I also want to point out here, pardon my scroll, if it's too fast, please let me know in the chat. Yes. So if you don't have a street number associated with a parcel, that longitude and latitude will suffice. So to find your latitude and longitude, you can visit the latitude and longitude finder here. and you can enter the information, and then it should populate the longitude and latitude for you. You're welcome. All right. And then for your tax parcel ID, you can do the same thing. We have linked here the Tennessee Property Viewer, where you can type in, you can select your county here, and then you can enter your address here. In the event that you can't find it that way, a little trick of mine is to look at my documentation one and see if it's there. But if not, you can always try Googling the address and looking for the parcel ID that way. You'll then move on to uploading your proof of ownership. That will look like some of the documentation that Mike went over in the previous slide, something like a deed, for example. And then if you have an FSA number, if applicable, you will enter that here. And then your land use classification. And so below we have a list of the acceptable file types, which are listed here. And then we have a list of allowed documentation. Yes, your parcel ID will be on your tax form. For your land use classification, it can be verified by submitting any of the following documentation dated from 2023 or 2024 before Hurricane Helene. And so those are those ones that I read at the beginning of the form. We've got above ground irrigation, on farm bridge, on farm road, kind of get the idea there. But we do have an option for other at the bottom.
Mary, we lost your screen.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Share. Not sure what happened there. How about now?
We see it now.
Okay, my apologies. Not sure what happened there. I'm gonna back up to the list. So infrastructure loss here, as I was mentioning, you could check one of these, but if you do not see yours listed, then you can select other, and then you can enter your, you can state your other specific infrastructure loss here. Here are the infrastructure loss requirements. For all infrastructure losses, the applicant is required to have at least $1,000 loss. For all infrastructure losses, have at least 10 acres of farmland per application. For all infrastructure, future economic and market losses combined, have either repaired or replaced or will repair or replace the lost infrastructure. Submit photographic evidence of the damage or destruction. And then for specific on-farm building structure loss requirements, they are listed here. The same for specific roads, bridges, and culvert loss requirements, and then above irrigation loss. And we chose an on-farm bridge. So for the one in our example, it states that eligible roads, bridges, and culverts must provide direct access to farm production and be located on the farm. To be eligible, the roads, bridges, and culverts must have suffered significant damage, such as a complete washout, and be impassable. The eligible roads, bridges, and culverts must be located in an eligible county. Roads, bridges, and culverts located on forest land are not eligible. I'll confirm that the loss meets the infrastructure loss requirements that were stated above. And then it will ask about the financial infrastructure loss amount. In the table below, you'll want to itemize each loss by entering the individual losses in separate rows. It says here, your total eligible loss is the smaller of these two amounts, the estimated value of the damaged or destroyed structure, or the documented cost to repair or replace the structure. For that amount, from that amount, the table will subtract the entered other payments received, which includes any insurance payments, disaster assistance, or other funds received for the same loss. The formula in the table below is the eligible loss equals total eligible loss, smaller of structure value or repair / replacement costs minus other payments received. So there will be a table here and the calculations will run. If you bear with me for just a second, I'm going to pull up that view.
While Mary is doing that, Rachel, we had another question that came in the chat about FSA numbers. It asks if the account identification number on our agricultural tax exemption form is the same as the FSA number. Can you speak to that, Rachel?
Thanks, Samantha. Michael is actually looking into it right now and will respond. We just want to make sure we're giving the correct information.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mary, are you still with us?
I am still here. My apologies. I cannot get that table to pop up. I have been having the strangest connectivity issues all day. And that's sort of how things happen when you got a big presentation coming up, huh? Bear with me just a second.
Yeah. Rachel, if you want to backtrack, we do have another question in the chat that came a little earlier that we didn't address. And it came from Rob. He was asking about the damage photos. He asked, what if the after damage photo is just the river, the barns, foundation, and land were obliterated by the flood?
Yeah, thanks, Samantha. That's a good question. Really, any documentation, any photos that you can show the before and after from the same vantage point where the barn may have been or the structure may have been, that would be very helpful, just so that we could kind of recognize what it would have been, where it would have been, and see that it's no longer there. So anything that you can show us what the destruction was will be very helpful to your cause. So I hope that answers the question.
I think we can answer one more question in the chat from Kelly. Said, to be clear, if there are more than one infrastructure damaged, do I have to do 3 separate forms, or are they all to be listed on the application?
That's also a very good question. Thanks, Samantha. Yes, you can include them on one form if it's the same farm or forest land. So essentially, any type of loss that you have for one farm would all go into one request form. If you have multiple farms, then you would have to submit multiple request forms with the type of loss for that particular farm. But if you have, say, 3 structures on one farm, you would submit that within the same request form. And Mary, I know you're still trying to find it. I can pull up an example of the table if you would like.
If you can, that's great. But Megan is sending me one over.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
And she's able to get it fixed for me real quick.
Okay.
Thank you all for being patient with us.
Any other questions while we wait? These are all really good questions.
So we have another question from Jesse. If roads are excluded, where are examples of qualifying infrastructure lost on forest land?
Not sure I understand the question. Others may. Heather, if this is forestry related, we do allow to claim on-farm roads. So if they are roads that lead to an access to a farm, then that would be eligible. I'm not sure if I'm answering that question. It's possible you could claim that and timber loss if it is related to forestry. So you'd be able to submit potentially for both losses.
So Heather has commented in the chat that timber is only eligible because other USDA programs cover roads.
Okay, great. If it is a separate road for a separate farm access, then that would be eligible under a separate category, but that makes sense.
All right, if you all are ready, I have got
Yes.
that form pulled up. Thanks, Megan, for fixing that for me. All right. So we're here. We've gone over the requirements, confirmed that we met those requirements, and then went over the formula for the table. So here you'll want to enter the financial loss item. And we said that we had an on-farm bridge. Just gonna put in, oh, it's already got numbers in there, so we'll just go with that one. And then say you receive insurance payments or any other type of payments received, you will put that here, and we're just gonna do, let's see, that. And then once you tab or click out of that box, it will do the calculation for you, as you see there. And if there was more than one item, I think this may address one of the questions in the chat, but if there's more than one financial loss item, say there was an on-farm road or some other type of infrastructure loss, you would list them all here the same way, and then they will total at the bottom right there. And then here underneath there, the table, it just lets you know that total eligible loss as determined by supporting documentation, other payments received is all other payments received on the loss, can include private insurance or payments received from tax form 4684. Then there's net loss, and total loss will be calculated once you click out of a cell, as I mentioned up there. And it is also mentioned here not to put a dollar sign or commas or anything of that nature into the table so that it doesn't upset the calculations happening there. If you added anything to the table above, you'll provide the evidence of any other payments received for that infrastructure loss, and there's up to 10 files to attach. So whatever documentation that you have, you'll want to upload that here. Then you'll want to explain in a short narrative how your documents prove the infrastructure loss amount meets all requirements, shows the damage, and shows how your farm helps the community. There's a 500-word limit, so you'll want to answer those questions there in that box. And then after that, you'll upload the required infrastructure loss documentation that is listed below. You may also upload any additional documents if desired. And so what that looks like as far as your documentation. Again, that could be blueprints or schematics, including dimension of infrastructure, insurance settlement documentation, and explanatory letters from your local extension office or some type of similar verification. You'll want 3 to 5 photos per structure or horizontal layout. Time and date stamps will help support your documentation. Any invoices and or receipts, and again, insurance claims. And you'll upload that here. You'll either save the draft if you're still working on it and need to come back to it, or you're working with a collaborator, or you'll go ahead and submit that form. Once you submit the form, then you have completed that request form. The request form, then once you completed the request form, you will then receive another email. So you get that confirmation email that we talked about earlier on. And then if you need to complete another request form, if you have more than one farm or forest land, then you'll continue on with that one. If not, then you're good to go as far as your request forms. All right.
Thanks, Mary. I think in the interest of time, why don't we go ahead and move on? But the other types of categories, the loss categories, function in a very similar way as what Mary just showed you. So feel free to follow those prompts as well. All right, I'm gonna resume where we were. All right, okay, all right. All right, so just quickly, reminders that the application will remain open until July 21st at 5 p.m. You may receive emails as we review your documentation, requesting additional documentation. This will come through Submittable, so be sure you check your spam for any of those emails. If just make sure you're clearing that and making sure that you're looking to see if you have any emails coming through from Submittable. We ask that applicants respond to any inquiry within 7 calendar days of that request. If that's not possible, if you need an extension, we're more than happy to work with you. Just let us know. And again, if you need any translation services, please reach out to us and we will be happy to coordinate that for you. Technical assistance, there's some information here on the screen for Submittable. They can help work through any sort of functionality issues with the application itself. And then we're gonna kind of round things out with funding decisions and just some resources. So Mandy, I'll hand it to you.
Yes, thanks, Rachel. Good evening, everybody. So now that we've covered the application process, I'm going to walk through kind of what happens after the submission. So specifically how funding decisions are made, when applicants can expect updates, and really how those payments will be distributed. So applicants will receive funding decisions by September, receive funding decisions by September 15th. Which is about 8 weeks after the application closes. The final award amounts may be adjusted based upon the overall demand, but will not exceed that 90% of the eligible losses. The approved applicants will receive the payment typically within 14 calendar days of notification, which should be by September 29th. And please note really that applicants must be registered in the state's Edison system to receive the payment for the grant funds. So if you're not already registered, our Tennessee Department of Agriculture will assist you through that process. And so our goal really is to ensure that payments are issued as efficiently and accurately as possible. So we want to assist you during that process. Next slide. So next, I'd really like to just highlight the resources available to support applicants through the process. So the Hurricane Helene Agriculture and Timber Relief Fund webpage is really our central hub for all program information. On this webpage, applicants can access the application link, contact information for our team. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions or need assistance. Also, we offer the frequently asked questions page and detailed guidance on the required documentation to be eligible to apply for this grant. We really strongly encourage applicants and partners to really review these resources as much as possible before starting the application, and this really helps to ensure a complete and timely submission. And so for the next slide. So this, for applicants applying under the timber loss category, I know Rachel had mentioned a forest management plan is required and must be completed by an accredited forester. So a directory of the accredited foresters is available on the program webpage. And so there's also a forest management plan assistant payment available to really offset the cost of developing that plan, which is really great. To receive reimbursement, applicants will need to submit that invoice. And then these resources are really intended to support both program eligibility and the long-term forest management. And next slide. And here, and before we move to questions, I just kind of wanted to cover a few of the frequently asked questions that we've heard so far. And that may be helpful for you as you're looking to submit your application. So applicants can certainly still apply if you've received federal funding, as long as the total assistance does not exceed that 90% of your losses. Payments are considered taxable income. I know I did see a note in the chat box. So it is taxable income, and grant recipients will receive that 1099 form to fill out. Insurance payments or salvage proceeds will be taken into account, and as this program only covers the unmet losses. And finally, applicants do not need to be registered in Edison to apply, but you must complete the registration before receiving the payment. So that is something we will assist you with. If you have not previously received payment through our department before, we will assist you through that process. Additional frequently asked questions are available on our website, and we'll continue to update them as needed as we move forward. And I will go ahead and just pass it on over to Samantha.
Yeah, so we would love to take more questions from you all. I'm going to go back through the chat real quick and point out some questions that were either answered or are still looming. But if you would like to speak and ask a question, you can raise your hands on the system, and it will allow me to unmute you to ask that question. So just to go through, somebody had asked if the FSA number is the same as the farm number for USDA, and yes, that is the same number. There was also a question asking if accredited foresters are aware of this relief plan and will be in the know to help. Yes, we did have a separate webinar with our accredited foresters so that they are aware and ready. So a question that has not been answered is, will there be any help with sediment removal?
No, that is not one of our eligible covered losses through this program.
Thank you. So a question about infrastructure. Are fences, corrals, water lines, or troughs considered infrastructure?
I believe, and I'm looking at Mike to help me remember, I don't believe that's true, but Matthew and Rachel, please help me if they are. I don't believe that they are, though.
No, they are not eligible.
Thank you. Thanks for confirming. There's a lot going on.
You're good. Thank you.
Similar question asking if a well system is also considered under that.
No.
Rachel is shaking her head. That is
No,
not
sorry,
one of the
no.
eligible. No. So a question was raised, if one receives the grant, is it considered income? We did answer that in the chat that a 1099 will be sent, but there was a follow-up question just trying to understand that a little bit better of why it is taxed.
Rachel, would you like for me to help with that
Yes,
one?
thank you.
Okay,
I was
great.
looking over at Mike because he and I were talking.
All grants that are issued by the Department of Agriculture receive a 1099. That's just a requirement that's placed upon us. And so we don't have a choice. And I'm sorry about that, but that's just essentially what we have to do.
Thank you, Rachel. A question answered in the chat was, what is the total amount of grants possible? There is a payment cap of $2.5 million per application, though that cap may be lowered if requests exceed our available funding. Somebody has asked another question about what's covered and asked, our tractors that were flooded covered? That is also a no.
Unfortunately, no. Yep.
That is not considered. Troy has asked if you filed Form 4684 on your income tax, how do you figure out what your actual payment was since it is based on your tax liability? Example, 12%.
We may have to follow up on that question, unfortunately. So we will take that question back and then respond to the person who asked.
Yeah, Troy, we have your email address and can email you that directly to troubleshoot. Any other questions in the chat, or if you would like to raise your hand, we can unmute you. Okay, I see another question. There are no accredited foresters in my area. I have used a certified forester from North Carolina who is licensed in this area and has worked on my forest management plan. How can a forester be accredited, or do we have to use only accredited foresters on the list provided?
Heather, I will defer to you on that question.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay?
We can.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for that question. And it's very simple to become accredited in Tennessee. All you have to do is go onto the Tennessee Forestry Association's website, and the forester can sign up to be accredited in Tennessee. So it's very simple to do that.
Benjamin asked a question to use UT extension. I'm assuming that that is also in relation to accredited foresters. Heather, is that a route?
To use UT extension, forestry extension
Yes.
personnel. If they are accredited foresters, then yes, that is appropriate.
Samantha, this may be a good time to say that we are partnering with UT Extension on this grant. They have worked extensively with us to help stand up this program. And the extension agents in the 8 counties are very prepared and ready to assist with any and all application questions. They've been phenomenal partners of ours on this grant program.
Thank you, Rachel, for pointing that out. One other question about destroyed sewer systems being eligible. And no, that is not a qualified loss. Benjamin asked, do we need collaboration from them? I think you're asking, do you have to touch base with UT Extension? No, that is not a requirement. They're just there if you need them. But you would need collaboration from an accredited forester, yes. Any other questions? I don't see any hands raised. Okay. Well, oh, Jesse has a question. Did you raise your hand on WebEx? Because it only lets me unmute people once I see their hand is raised that way. I see a new question. Can we apply for both farm and forest timber loss?
Yes, you absolutely can.
Jesse, unfortunately, I cannot see where your hand is raised and it's not giving me the option. If you have the ability to ask in the chat, please put it there. If anyone has any other questions that they don't want to share in the chat or share with the group, obviously you can always email us at ag.recovery@tn.gov if it's a more sensitive question. But you can email us there if you prefer that route.
And Samantha, I just dropped in the link to our webpage. So hopefully everyone can access that. And correct me if I'm wrong, Samantha, but the recording and the slide deck will be available on our webpage.
Correct. We will link it directly there after this. Well, Commissioner, I know you are still on. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we move on and say goodbye to everyone?
No, sorry for the printer printing in the bank. No, I appreciate the opportunity to go over this information so thoroughly and appreciate everybody that's joining us this evening.
Well, thank you everyone for your time tonight. And yeah, if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We've put that information on the screen. Email is ag.recovery@tn.gov. And then you can call us using a local number, which is 615-837-5241, or toll free at 833-616-6700. Our office hours are between 8 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. I'm sorry, 8 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Central. So if you leave any calls during our after hours, we'll get back to you the next day or the following Monday if it's a weekend.